similarly to, lots of groupings like, Beyonce and Jay-Z, Sonny and Cher, you often hear diversity, equity, inclusion together, or D&I in particular together. And what you need to know is that while they are symbiotic, or they should be, they're very different. So let's break them down. So diversity is all of the things that make us different and special. Oftentimes when you think about diversity, people will think about the things that are visually representative of diversity, like race or gender expression, or disability or ability. Diversity is all of the things, right? So it's expansive. It is your role in the organization. It's the language that you speak. It's your accent. It's the thoughts you have. It's your political leanings. All of those things go into what encompasses your diversity. So if you're in a room, unless you're by yourself, it's diverse. Right? Oftentimes people will use the term diverse when they mean race or they mean other things, as opposed to the expansive definition. Diversity is expansive and inclusive of everything. Speaking of inclusion, inclusion is the state of being in which you feel as if you're included in an environment. Inclusion is hard because it requires you to ask. You say, hi, there's that person, they must be included or feel included. You don't know unless you actually interact with them. And in fact, you have to continually interact with them to make sure they continually feel included. And that's what makes it hard. Equity is the easiest and also most challenging of them, because equity is fairness, right? And fairness comes with rules and policies and things that are done in order to make sure people have similar experiences. Equity is not equality. What's the difference? So if I say I want everything to be equal, and folks are not similarly situated, let's say within an organization, and I give everyone the same thing, I'm not actually helping the folks who don't have what other folks have at other levels. Equity is saying, what do you need, and making sure you get that thing, and making sure that that resulting giving of what you need becomes the fairness that's happening in an organization. And it's challenging because oftentimes people don't want to highlight when it doesn't exist, right? They don't want to say, oh, that woman, she's not getting paid the same as that man, or that group is being treated differently. And it makes it challenging because you have to highlight the inequities before you can then strive for equity. You need to start with assessment. You have to know where you are before you can decide where you're going to go. And that assessment for organizations can sometimes be challenging or a little bit painful, because it's really saying, hey, we haven't been doing X thing, or we don't have any women or people of color in our leadership, right? That assessment opens doors and shines the light on something that can be challenging, but it's necessary in order for you to set goals. You have to have the leadership on board. And what I find is that you have often organizations that are, there's a movement that's driven by the people, and I love, activism through a letter or whatever it is that folks are going to do, but the leaders may be disconnected or feel as if they're being pushed into something. We need to make sure our leaders are aligned, and not just aligned, but actually striving to make this a part of the change that happens. And so oftentimes the work that I do with organizations starts with one-on-one coaching or consultation with leaders to say, let's prepare you for this change and prepare you to be not just a supporter, but a driver of this change, because people look up to make sure that the commitment is there. You should crowdsource, but not crowd stress. That means you want to get some of the feedback from the people who are within your organization about what their experiences are, right? That part of that assessment. But when you flip it around, it doesn't mean that you want to then burden them with doing the work that should be done by either an external consultant or someone who you hire internally to be in charge of driving diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you think about this, you have affinity groups or initiatives or diversity committees that are there to think about diversity and equity and inclusion, and you have inequitable ways in which they're not receiving compensation in order to drive diversity, equity, inclusion in an organization. You must make sure that if you have folks who are internal, who it's not their role to do this work, that you make sure you compensate them, that you acknowledge that they're doing work that is not in their stream of work. It's really talking the talk and walking the walk when you do this. You're never done with DEI, put that on the tweet. You're not. And in fact, anytime someone leaves or somebody comes in, you have to continue to sort of reiterate to make sure inclusion happens. Just because you have one person of color or woman or representative of whatever group in the leadership or anywhere in the ranks, that's not enough. Right? We have moved past tokenism and we want actual representation. And so in order to have that and have that be a part of your culture, you have to keep going. You have to keep assessing. Similar to any other core business function, diversity, equity, inclusion is a core business function. It should be incorporated into your strategic plan. It's not separate, it is a part of it. And if you are deprioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion at this time, you have your eyes closed and your head in the sand like an ostrich. Guess what? Everybody wants it. Shareholders, you have stockholders, you have folks who are saying, hey, I'm not going to invest, I'm not going to support if you don't do this. And on the flip side, no one's going to come and work there, or they're going to leave. I laugh when I hear folks saying sometimes, oh, you know, our organization is suffering from diversity fatigue. Great. When I'm on the treadmill, I suffer from fatigue too, but you know what? In the summertime, I want to look good. This is a marathon you're running when it comes to diversity. It's not a sprint. You can't get there fast, you have to do the work, and you have to continue to do the work. One of the ways that I prefer to interact with organizations when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion is through education, right? And that is one of the core functions of how you sort of shift organizations. Education is so important because if I say diversity, equity, inclusion, and we all have a different definition of what those things are, we're already starting off on different corners of the room. We have to have a baseline understanding of terminology. We have to have understandings of how lack of DEI or lack of allyship or microaggressions or whatever the topic it is we're talking about, how it impacts different groups. You have to drive empathy through understanding. You have to have shared experiences and opportunity for folks to engage, and that's where I add the most value. I make it that we have uncomfortable conversations in a place that is comfortable as possible, as opposed to finger pointing at first. It really is saying that we're all in this to make the world hopefully better, and it's challenging, but we can do so in a space where there is shared understanding, shared commitment. Then we're making a change that is important for any organization. And that's really where I come in and start to have those conversations, start to have those level setting and 2.0, 3.0 conversations to shift culture.